Welcome to the Mind Spark, bringing you the latest news from around the world. The Trump administration's announcement of sweeping new tariffs on Japanese automobiles marked a dramatic escalation in global trade tensions. With a single policy declaration, the White House signaled a major shift in America's approach to international commerce, targeting one of its oldest and most significant trading partners. The news sent shockwaves through global markets, triggering immediate and widespread panic among investors and business leaders alike. Around the world, traders scrambled to assess the fallout, as uncertainty rippled across financial centers from New York to London to Tokyo. The Nikkei 225, Japan's premier stock index, plunged sharply, erasing billions of dollars in market value within mere hours. The sudden drop reflected not just financial loss, but a deep anxiety about the future of the post-war economic order that had long underpinned global prosperity. This isn't just about cars, it's about broken promises, fraying alliances, and the unraveling of decades of trust between two economic giants. The tariffs exposed deep rifts, putting long-standing diplomatic and economic relationships under unprecedented strain. For decades, the US-Japan relationship has anchored stability in Asia and served as a cornerstone of global trade. Their partnership, built on mutual benefit and shared interests, helped shape the modern economic landscape and fostered growth across continents. Now, that partnership faces its toughest test in a generation. Business leaders on both sides of the Pacific are left grappling with uncertainty, as headlines warn of a new era of economic conflict and instability. The tariffs, intended to protect American industry and jobs, have instead unleashed a storm of uncertainty. Manufacturers, workers, and investors are all left wondering what the future holds, as volatility becomes the new normal. Wall Street panicked, the Dow tumbled, and the interconnected global economy felt the tremors. The effects were immediate and far-reaching, with markets around the world reacting to the sudden shift in U.S. trade policy. Automakers in Germany, suppliers in Mexico, and U.S. port workers all braced for impact. The global supply chain, finely tuned over decades, now faced disruption and uncertainty, threatening jobs and livelihoods in multiple countries. At the heart of this crisis lies a fundamental clash of visions. America, first protectionism, versus a global system built on free trade and international cooperation. The world watched as leaders debated the future of economic policy, with protests and negotiations unfolding in real time. Critics warn that dismantling this carefully constructed system risks triggering a global recession. Economists point to the dangers of rising costs, shrinking markets, and the potential for a downward spiral that could affect millions of workers and businesses worldwide. The stakes have never been higher. As anxious investors watch the markets and world leaders scramble to respond, the future of the global economy hangs in the balance, with every decision carrying consequences that will be felt for years to come. To grasp today's crisis, we must look back. The US-Japan alliance, born from the ashes of World War II, transformed Japan into a democratic powerhouse under America's security umbrella. Japan's export-driven growth relied heavily on access to the US market, creating a persistent trade surplus and underlying friction. But Japan faces deep vulnerabilities: an aging population, shrinking workforce, and the highest national debt in the developed world. Trade tensions aren't new, recall the 1980s, but were always managed through negotiation, never threatening the core alliance. What's different now is the unilateral US action, seen in Tokyo as a betrayal. Japan is forced to confront a new reality. Its greatest ally has become its greatest economic threat. The question, if not the US, who can Japan rely on? The tariffs hit Japan's auto industry like a sledgehammer. Toyota, Nissan, and Honda stocks nosedived, threatening millions of jobs and the backbone of Japan's economy. Small suppliers, many family-owned, now face bankruptcy as orders evaporate. The Japanese Prime Minister condemned the US move as a violation of trade rules, but options are limited. Emergency support packages offer little comfort. The main engine of growth has stalled. Automakers are freezing expansion and considering layoffs. For workers, already battered by decades of stagnation, this is another heavy blow. The promise of lifetime employment is fading fast. Economic anxiety is spreading across Japan's factory towns. The pain from tariffs isn't limited to Japan. These economic policies have a ripple effect that quickly crosses borders and oceans. It's coming straight to American wallets too. Everyday people, from families budgeting for groceries to individuals saving for a new car, are starting to feel the squeeze. Many so-called Japanese cars are actually built right here in the United States, in factories that employ thousands of American workers. But these cars rely on imported parts that are now subject to new tariffs, making them more expensive to bring in. As a result, higher production costs get passed along to consumers. Whether you're buying a Japanese, American, or European brand, you'll see higher prices at the dealership. The impact doesn't stop at the checkout. American workers at these plants, tens of thousands of them, depend on steady car sales for their jobs and livelihoods. If car sales drop because of rising prices, these workers could face layoffs or reduced hours, putting even more strain on local communities. The uncertainty created by tariffs is causing companies to freeze investment and slow down hiring across the entire auto supply chain, from parts suppliers to dealerships. And if Japan retaliates by slapping tariffs on US farm goods, the pain spreads even further. American farmers who rely on exporting crops like soybeans and corn to Japan could suddenly lose a vital market overnight, leaving their harvests unsold and their futures uncertain. A trade war spirals, creating victims far from the original dispute: small business owners, families, and workers who had nothing to do with the policy decisions. The stock market's plunge reflects this widespread fear. As businesses pull back on spending and investment, the risk of a broader economic slowdown grows. Main streets across America could see more empty storefronts and fewer jobs. Ironically, the very people tariffs were meant to help, American workers and families, could end up being the first to suffer, facing higher prices, job losses, and shrinking opportunities. This is how a trade war spreads pain everywhere, touching lives and communities far beyond the negotiating table. Japan didn't just protest, it struck back in the bond market. In a move that stunned global investors, Japanese officials signaled their discontent not with words, but with decisive financial action. The world watched as Japan, long seen as a reliable and quiet economic partner, suddenly shifted gears, making its presence felt in the heart of global finance. The Ministry of Finance quietly slowed its purchases of US Treasury bonds, a subtle but powerful maneuver. This unexpected pullback triggered a failed $22 billion bond auction, sending shockwaves through the financial community. For decades, Japan has been a cornerstone of stability in the US bond market, but now, that foundation was beginning to crack. As America's largest foreign creditor, Japan's move sent borrowing costs higher and rattled Wall Street. Traders scrambled to adjust as bond yields spiked and uncertainty spread. The ripple effects were immediate, with investors worldwide suddenly questioning the safety of what was once considered the world's most secure debt. US Treasury bonds fund everything from defense to social security. Japan's steady demand has kept rates low for decades. This reliable partnership has allowed the US government to borrow cheaply, supporting vital programs and fueling economic growth. But with Japan stepping back, the cost of funding these programs is set to rise. Now, higher rates mean more expensive mortgages, credit cards, and business loans for Americans. Home buyers face steeper monthly payments, families struggle with rising debt, and small businesses find it harder to invest and expand. The impact of Japan's decision is being felt not just on Wall Street but on Main Street as well. This is a historic shift. Japan is using its financial leverage, ending an era of quiet compliance. For years, Tokyo played the role of the silent supporter, but now it's asserting its power, reminding the world that economic relationships are built on mutual respect and shared interests. It's a high-stakes gamble, destabilizing the system it depends on, but forced by existential threats to its auto industry. Facing mounting trade pressures and the risk of punitive tariffs, Japan is signaling that it will not stand by while its core industries are threatened. The stakes are enormous, not just for Japan but for the entire global economy. The message from Tokyo is clear. The economic relationship is not a one-way street. Japan expects its interests to be respected, and it's willing to use its financial clout to make that point. This is a new era of economic diplomacy, where even the quietest allies can make the loudest statements. The quiet ally has found its voice, and Washington can't ignore it. As policymakers scramble to respond, the world is watching to see how this new dynamic will reshape the balance of power in global finance. The global financial system just got a lot more fragile. With trust shaken and alliances tested, the consequences of Japan's gambit are only beginning to unfold. The world's economic future may depend on how these two giants choose to move forward. Economists and policy experts are sounding the alarm. Dr. Evelyn Reed, Peterson Institute. This is a lose-lose. Tariffs won't bring back jobs, they'll disrupt supply chains, raise prices, and poison relations. Japan's bond retaliation, she warns, is like drilling holes in both sides of a lifeboat. Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO commander. The US-Japan alliance is the bedrock of Pacific security. This conflict is a gift to Beijing. Business leaders are blunt. Washington is playing checkers while the world plays chess. Our 5-year plans are in chaos. Even some Republicans dissent. Blindsiding allies isn't negotiation, it's demolition. We're dismantling a system that served America well. The consensus: de-escalate, negotiate, and repair the damage before it's too late. The stakes are economic and strategic. The world is watching America's next move. The conflict has spilled into currency and debt markets. Investors rush to the yen, driving it higher and hurting Japanese exporters. Japan's central bank faces a dilemma: intervene to weaken the yen and risk US retaliation, or let exporters suffer. Meanwhile, Japan's bond market move exposes America's financial vulnerability. The US relies on foreign buyers like Japan to fund its deficits cheaply. If Japan and China keep reducing holdings, the US must pay higher interest or print more money, risking inflation. The era of the dollar's unquestioned dominance is under threat. The financial battlefield is now global. This is no longer just a US-Japan dispute, it's a global contagion. Europe, especially Germany, fears it could be next as the US targets auto exports. In Asia, China is seizing the chance to woo US allies alienated by Washington. Japan is hedging, deepening ties with Europe and Asia, while the US finds itself increasingly isolated. Developing nations in the supply chain like Thailand and Australia are collateral damage as orders dry up. The World Trade Organization is powerless, global rules are breaking down. If every nation turns inward, we risk repeating the mistakes of the 1930s. The world economy is more fragile and divided than it's been in decades. We stand at a crossroads. A spiraling trade war could trigger a global recession and shatter trust between allies. The US-Japan alliance, built on shared values, is now fractured. Rebuilding trust will take years, if not generations. The global order, free trade, collective security, prosperity, is at risk of unraveling. The choice: confrontation and nationalism, or diplomacy and cooperation. The world is watching and the consequences will echo for decades. What kind of world do we want to build next?